Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gathering Movement. I'm here today with the beautiful, vibrant, just fun Jen Zash. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. I love to give people the backstory of how we met, and you and I met online in an awesome program called Be Seen Accelerator. And I don't even know exactly how we connected, probably just energetically drawn to each other. And we had such a beautiful conversation, just getting to know each other. And I just felt instantly connected to you. So I'm just so grateful that we made that connection.
Same. I think our mission is very, very similar, but it is when you just allow for connection without, being in the mind, it's amazing who shows up in our world, isn't it?
I totally agree. So, you've seen a little bit about the show and what we do. And really, this is a show all about empowerment. It's about sharing voices, it's about sharing powerful stories. And today we called this Mindful Mama's Mission. But I'd love to start a little bit with your backstory of school psychology and how you found yourself in that work to begin with.
Yeah, so I have, since as far back as I can remember, just always been really interested in knowing everybody's story, right? Everybody has the lens in which they see the world. And just since I'm a little girl, I just very much had this yearning. Like I wished that I could just transport into people's lives for a day to really be in their shoes and with this real deep understanding that everybody's experiences are unique, while also having this understanding that we all have this sense of shared humanity and that all of that wholeness that comes with that is okay and beautiful and um, just allowing people to show up exactly how they are, who they are, and they are perfect. And so many of us feel broken and like something's wrong or uninteresting. And I certainly don't feel that. And so I think no matter whoever I've met throughout my life has felt really comfortable opening up. About their story, about their journey, about their hardships, and I just love hearing it, similar to you and in this interview kind of format. You really, my best friends growing up since I'm 7 years old are all still best friends, have always termed me the interviewer. And it's just like looking back now, I didn't necessarily have that intention, but I love to be fully present with whoever I am with. And and so I think just that container has naturally invited people to share their stories and their hardships and their deepest, darkest secrets and problems, I guess you could say. And so early on in life, I was doing suicide assessments, and so like just it kind of naturally happens where you only find out about so many career paths, I think. And so it's like, oh, psychologist, okay, I'll do that. And both my parents were in the educational world, and I have an uncle who had been a school psychologist, so it kind of married all of my interests. I loved high school myself, and I was also very aware that things came pretty easily to me, and that it didn't necessarily come easily to a lot of other people. And just this understanding that like um, I'm blessed and I was always very grateful, and that now we know that that is really the number one predictor of like wellness. And so, I think that just all of that kind of pulled people towards me, and it just naturally progressed to becoming a school psychologist, which I've been for 20 years. I've worked with little ones. I was a preschool teacher actually while I was in graduate school. I worked as a college assistant professor. But then predominantly in the last 20 years, I've been in a public school, one of the best in the world, actually, high achieving. You learn in grad school best practices. It's as close as you're going to get. Great kids, amazing staff, but a lot of pressure. And I think that's also the world we live in. And so I've just seen over 20 years the levels of anxiety and depression and this competition rather than this and doing, like excessive manic sort of sense of doing instead of just being. I've seen children, dare I say, sort of like lose their childhood. And it just, from the moment I sort of entered the world of education with the lens of an educator and not a student myself, I couldn't believe how different the experience was from my own experience. And so, fast forward to then becoming a mom myself. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. And both in my roles as a psychologist as well as a mom, and I'm also a mindfulness instructor, an infant sleep trainer, a life coach. I have a number of different hats I wear. And in all of my roles, whether I'm working with children or adults, it's like helping people to kind of reclaim that sense of awe and finding that where joy lies. There's so many high school students, because I've been at the high school level for the last 14 years, where I tried to help them reconnect with that. They're just working so hard to achieve and scores and outcome results. And it broke my heart, but very often it took them going back to their earliest childhood memories to remember even what true joy and bliss was like. And so, this past year and a half, I guess it's been about, right? The COVID pause, I call it. Everything stopped, as we all know. And I was working as a school psychologist from home, like so many of us were, from March until the end of the school year. And I had time to really reflect and pause and think, like, okay, I'm not showing up for my own children, number one, in the way that I want to be doing, because my work, which I love being a school psychologist, but it is exhausting. It's like, it takes a lot, and I give 100 million%. And we didn't know what was going to happen in the world. And I knew that I wanted to just take it day by day and be home for my own children. So I took personal leave this year, which led me to create a program for moms called the Mindful Mama Mastermind. It is a parenting program that marries mindfulness with parenting and education and psychology, and basically all of the skills and expertise that I've learned over 20 years. And in real time, I meet with a community of moms, and it has been so empowering for them, because I think moms don't do for themselves; they're doing for everybody else constantly. And so I would be hard pressed to come up with even one mother who didn't, when I say, like, I got your back, every one of them is like, well, you're probably the only one, and that just is like, and so, and we all think we're so messed up as moms and screwing up our kids. And so for them to be in this container and hear, wow, I actually and realize I'm doing an amazing job and I am a good mom. And then I help them just kind of tweak certain things so that they can show up differently and actually really enjoy being a parent. And so, every mom I work with said, you said it would transform my life, but like it really, and in ways that, because then when we show up for ourselves, what else happens and shows up just naturally, then they find the things that brought them joy early on in their life very often. And we rekindle that. And so it's just been so empowering for these moms and for myself as a mom, and to be able to lead this group and this program has been just incredible. And I wish I had something like that when my kids were little, because they are still young, 10 and 12, but my really rough patch was when they were itty bitties. And and I felt really broken and really alone. And I want every mother to be able to have a group of like-minded, badass, awesome moms that they can just be themselves with, and then also get expert advice in real time with whatever is going on with their children, with their family, with themselves, rather than go into a random Facebook group and ask strangers, like, well, what should I do when some serious situation comes up with their kid, as I'm reading this, like, oh my gosh, and with the best of intentions, there's really good people out there, but a lot of times psychological advice and guidance is counterintuitive. And so, so to be able to just kind of put all of that together in a program has been like surreal, really. So
Yeah. There's so many different things I want to talk about. You know, we have like the mindfulness aspect, but something that's coming to me is like you started your work working with children, and now you are also working with the adults. And I see everything like parent and child relationship probably like a mirror. So I'm curious, it's not just the parents who you're working with or the mothers who you're working with, but how has your work with them impacted their parenting or their children?
great question. Thank you for asking that. It has, so I've worked with kids, obviously, one-on-one, and also in a consultant fashion with teachers, with parents in my role as a school psychologist. Um, in this role, working with parents and on a weekly, even more than weekly basis, it has transformed not only how their child shows up in the world, but the relationship, the family dynamics, more so, exponentially more so than when I've worked with children one to one. Um, which has been so fascinating and actually like just wonderful in so many ways, because I think it empowers moms to feel like I don't need to necessarily. I'm not saying that there's not a place for therapists and specialists. There certainly is a place for that, but moms they know their kids better than anybody. And when they can tap into that and get that affirmation, like I said, with just some guidance, then they feel more confident as a mom, which then their child feels. And then the key is attunement. So then they can attune to their child because they get out of their head and they just instinctually know, right? It's the term mother's instinct. So they then know what their child needs. And then it's just this beautiful flow, where they don't have to read every book and do every course, because they start to just, and it was beautiful to see the progression in the 12 weeks that I've worked with these moms, where early on, we are so in our heads, and there are skills to learn, certainly. But, about the halfway mark, they will catch themselves and say, like, I know I don't even need to reach out because I know what I need to do and I know what my kid needs. It's a matter of really going inward and recognizing like what their own triggers are, how they were parented. And once they are able to do that, then they can regulate. And once they regulate, because I'm also teaching them about mindfulness, then their child picks up that energy and the child becomes regulated. The whole family becomes regulated. And that shifts everything for good. Then you're really forever transformed. And even when the program ends, so maybe you're not having that constant accountability, they then know how to come back, because now they have the tools. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. And it reminds me of something that you said when we first started, that you were seeing a lot of the kids just feeling so pressured, so overwhelmed with school and tests and, SATs and getting into college. And when we start to bring joy and gratitude to the parent, I'm sure that then reflects to the child, and maybe they start to just enjoy life a little bit more, because I remember that time too, it being like, you must get a good grade on this, you must be applying to colleges. It was a little bit of, we forgot that what it meant to just like live and just have fun. And I'm redefining that for myself right now, but I'm curious, I bet that you saw that too.
I love that. And you just hit the nail on the head, because it's huge. I've never looked at my children's report cards, and I have a 7th grader and a 5th grader. I mean, and that's true. And so every parent teacher conference I show up and the teacher says, I'm sure you've seen this. And nope. Because our report card is kindness. The one rule that we have in our house is to be kind. We live by family values, not goals and rules, but rather intentions and family values that we come up with for our family. What kind of is gonna guide us? And grades and outcomes it's not where it's at, and my kids know that, and and their dad feels differently, and that's okay. It's not about like pushing our agenda. It's about exposing different ways of looking at the world and situations. And yes, I think my way is the better way. But no, I mean,
we all do.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And you know what, but there's something to be said for how he shows up, and them learning that there are different perspectives, and then they're going to have to find their own way. And that's kind of the last part of my program too, is like looking towards the future and recognizing that this is our child's own journey, and we as parents want to protect, and we think we know best, but we don't. They actually know so much more than we do. And they're, Dr. Shafali does a lot of beautiful work in the world of parenting. And, she views children as like our spiritual teachers. And I very much feel the same way, because I've learned the greatest lessons through the eyes of my children and their experiences. And they know how to live in the present moment way more than grown-ups do. And their divergent thinking, their innovation, their creativity is so much more stellar than grown-ups, who, according to the research, lose it when we go into a traditional model of education. So it's really, it's pretty incredible. And so, yes, I think it is critical in my work with the parents to, through mindfulness, yes, showing up differently. But then the other big part of it too is, because I am an educator and very much a researcher, there's a ton of research out there in the world of education, and a lot of misinformation. So parents with the best of intentions think that they need to put their children in a million different activities and put them in AP courses and start them in SAT classes and Saturday classes, by the time they're 3. And that's simply not true. And having worked with colleges now and some of the best, that's not what they're looking for either. So when parents learn really the research, it's very, very empowering. And it gives them a sense of release, because it actually takes the pressure off. Because parents, like I said, really, really want what's best for their children. And even if it may not appear that way to some people, I do really believe that. But it's not about the grades. Like, for instance, just to kind of give a quick example, there was a study done where they had children read an excerpt. And then they had another group read the same excerpt. But one group, they told the kids, you're going to be tested at the end of it. And the other group, they just said, read it. And the group that read it without the idea that they were going to be tested actually took the test as well and performed significantly better. And so that's just one example of many that really just illustrate, or at least get you thinking, hopefully, about just testing in general and outcomes education and kind of and all of that, really, And so teaching parents about that has also been really, really helpful.
This is so interesting. As you're talking, I'm reflecting on a paper I wrote in high school, and it was about how I thought that the SATs were a poor indicator of intelligence and true knowledge and true wisdom.
That's amazing. I love that.
So I've always been the person who somehow saw beyond. But my question going forward is, I'm married, and my husband and I think about having kids one day. And I ironically was walking at a park, and it was a random book drive or book drop off pickup kind of thing. I picked up the book, and it was called Bringing Home Bebe, or Bringing Up Bebe. And it's a French parenting book. And she compares French versus American parenting. It's very, very interesting. And I'm finding it just really eye-opening, different parenting styles, different education models. And I'm really curious what you think is the future of education. You said that you're writing a little bit of a book on this now. So I want to hear your thoughts on this. What's the future of this look like for us?
Yeah, so I think that I view the caretaker as the educator and the parent. So, educators now have to wear so many different hats, and so do we as mom, especially, right, in the face of COVID, where moms were then also teachers as well, right, and still are, a lot of them, which is why the timing of my program is just essential. But I think that the paradigm of education is going to shift. I think everything's going to shift. And in my world as a psychologist, it sounds kind of psychotic. But I look forward to people hitting rock bottom, because that's usually the only time people make change.
Yep.
And so I've called this sort of a rock bottom revolution, because as this global, it's a global phenomenon, right? This pandemic. And I don't know if by you had like the rainbows, but I'm in New York and everybody had little rainbows in their windows of like, we're all in this. Oh, okay. So it was this, we're all in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And the rainbows. And it was this like very comforting community sense. And, being in New York too, like I remember September 11th very, very vividly. And so it pulls us together these difficult times as well. So both on an individual level and collectively, these difficult times not only make us pause, but they also, there's this sense of like, okay, we're in this together. I'm not alone. And that does fade, but my hope is that it doesn't. And so this is an awakening, as I see it, and I'm co-authoring a book called A New Paradigm of Education with educators from around the world that's going to launch we're aiming for July, but we're organically even creating this book, co-creating it, and we want it to sort of mirror what we hope education to look like, a new model. And there's already very different models of parenting, as we brought up, and very different models of education. So we have like Montessori education. We have some of the authors. We have a parent who teaches through the guise of world education. And we have someone who homeschools. And so there's all these different models out there. Where, again, same thing with parenting. There is, more of that traditional model of how a lot of us grew up. That authoritarian, like, I know better as the parent, and this is what you need to do, and there is no talking back, and strong grades and study, and a very different, and I know this will resonate with you too, this idea of redefining success, right? And so I think how we define success as an educator and as a parent is really what it kind of comes down to. So in my home and in my role as school psychologist, I see success as somebody being able to, that child being able to show up authentically as themselves, day in and day out, being accepted in that way, surrounding themselves by people who allow for that, who celebrate their wholeness. And then in terms of education and parenting, and this is the way I operate in both fashions, is really letting the child take the lead. And so exposing them to different things, whether that's in a classroom or at home. I expose my children to different types of sports and art and different things, but I let them see where their soul comes alive. And then, kind of stay on that course. And so like my children are really into like entrepreneurship. And so I know, I love it. And so, and challenging the status quo. I don't know where they get that from. And so like, of course I nurture that. Yes, I'm a little bit, biased, but I nurture that. And those kinds of things are not that commonplace, like a lot of kids are doing sports and things like that. You don't see too many children like who are really in that entrepreneurial world, or even they wrote part of the book too about challenging sort of the status quo of education. I know, it's so cool. And so I really, support all of that, and I try to have that mentality. And I feel like I always need to amp up the power of play. And I naturally have a very playful personality, and I'm always barefoot and having lip ring fights with them. But most of the parents that I work with, cringe when I tell them those kinds of things. That's just not how they are, and that's fine. So helping educators and parents show up authentically as themselves, but finding and rediscovering really play and joy in a way that's still authentic to themselves. And again, our children help us do that. And so even my most like conservative moms that I've worked with, who, they don't even know what to do with their kids when they have like one-to-one time, because that's part of the program too. So I give them some ideas, but they're surprised at then once their child does take the lead, how much they actually really enjoy it themselves, whether it's playing heads up or just doing art or getting dirty outside and playing those games. It's new. Our brains don't like new usually, but that's why the coaching is so powerful. Because I give them that accountability, but in a gentle, loving way, meeting them where they're at.
I love this conversation, and I love people who challenge the status quo. I think it's a really healthy thing, and I think it's great that we can encourage our children to think outside of the box too and appreciate different perspectives. Like you said before, I think it really is important. And as we wrap up this conversation, 2 last questions. Number one, what is your biggest message to mothers these days? What do you think that they really need to hear?
Oh, that just made me want to cry.
Mm.
I think they need to hear that you're doing an amazing job, that you are the best mom, that your children think you are incredible. And it's getting me all children.
Me too.
You know, I want to hug every mom out there, and I want them to be kind to themselves. You know, every week I have my moms that I work with, like, come before we talk about any problems, any questions, just like, what was a win that you had? And they really start to, it's so beautiful to see week after week, as they start paying attention to how freaking amazing they are, then it starts to become second nature. So just start paying attention to all that you do. That's just in being you. You know, showing up every day, because it's the only job that is 24/7, 365 days a year. So you are killing it. That's what I want moms to hear.
So true. And Mom, if you're listening, my mom's listening, I love you.
Love you, Mom. And Mom too.
Love you. And last but not least, how can people connect with you? How can moms connect with you if they're feeling so drawn to this, if they need some love and support and just your energy?
Yeah, thank you. So Jen Zash, JenZash.com is my website. And on there, I have all of my contact information, and my personal cell is there. If you text me Gathering Movement too, I will give you a free consult, especially if you're a mama and you're in need of some quick boost of self-love, then I got you.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful that we could have this conversation. I have so many more questions, so maybe we'll do a round 2 of parenting and all this jazz. I love this. I'm so grateful for you, Jen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It means the world, and thank you for all of the good that you do every day in this world, because it is for all your listeners. What this woman does every single day to make this world a better place is hard to put into words. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, everyone who supports this mission of empowering other people, of sharing powerful stories. I love you all, and I hope everyone has a beautiful week ahead. See you later.
Bye.